Take me higher. Now I'm losing control.
Hey everyone, welcome to Living in the Question podcast. I'm Sadie.
I'm Maddie.
And welcome. We are so pumped to be here today and we have an amazing topic. So it's actually interesting because the full moon was this morning at its fullest. Do you have something for
It
that, by the
was.
way?
Yeah, so the full moon was in Virgo
Mhm.
and it was actually really interesting. I feel like it was resonating with so many people.
Yeah.
Even like guy friends were messaging me like this full moon is really affecting me, and I was surprised by
Right.
that. So I just wanted to share a little bit about what I read it was about. Um so this is actually from Jupiter Jewelry Astrology, and I think that they are very spot on.
Mhm.
They said chapters are ending under the Virgo full moon, testing your ability to withstand the discomfort of confusion, imperfection, and incompletion.
Mm.
When what is done to the universe's standard, can you cultivate acceptance of what is by letting go? Or will you continue to fight for control over the way that endings manifest in your life?
This is so relevant for me. I'm just
Yeah.
laughing because, the last couple days I've just been like so aware of some things. I'm going to talk about my awareness check-in, but it was like I had this feeling of like, oh my gosh, the full moon's got to be coming up because there's a lot coming up. And then I looked, sure enough, it's the morning we're recording this podcast. So here we are.
I know. And it continues saying, when you have tried and tried again to make things work to no avail, can you shift your compulsive energy and see your problems in a new light? Stepping away and creating space could be the key to everything stepping away and creating space could be the key to everything locking into place. I've been feeling that too, like I'm trying so hard to build my business and I'm like trying to take these steps to do it, and there's just this resistance showing up for me. I'm getting so frustrated and trying to like force it.
Right.
So maybe I do just need to like take that space a little bit,
Yeah.
let it breathe.
Right.
Let it cultivate itself, you know?
Right. Well, it's like, it's the whole idea of when we try so hard with something, like we're trying so hard and we have this like perspective, right? Of this is what it's going to be. And it never ends up being that thing because we're holding so tightly onto what it is and doing it and getting it done and all of that, that like I think the space to breathe really does bring clarity and stop holding so tightly. Like just let it be where it is and you will get new ideas and you'll get more creative energy in that space.
Right.
So I think that is so important, which leads us perfectly into our awareness check-in. I'm so glad you read that because I haven't read anything about the full moon yet, and hearing that just blows my mind because I had a whole healing yesterday with my healer and it was all around that specific thing. So that's what my awareness check-in is today, is around my habits. I'm so aware of all of these bad habits that I have and that I want to change, and I've worked them in so many different ways. Like I've worked them from all angles, and I'm still consciously choosing to do the thing, whatever it is. Like I'm aware of all the ways that I shouldn't be doing it, or I can shift this and it can be better this way and whatever, right? But I never do it. Like I'm consciously choosing to keep in my habit.
Yeah.
So what you just shared about maybe if you let go a little bit and don't hold so tightly, maybe you'll get clarity. And that's so freaking beautiful because tomorrow I've been in that space of holding so tightly. That's the exact phrase that I used to my healer yesterday, is I feel like I'm holding so tightly onto this, you know, these addictive patterns, like just these things that I know I should let go of, but I don't want to, and I'm holding tightly. And then tomorrow, I'm going on a vacation to Washington, and we don't have any plans for a whole week. I don't have to work. Like, I have all the space.
Hey,
so I love this. This is so perfect for today. So I just feel like I just need that perspective shift.
Yeah.
You know?
And no better way than traveling and being in a new setting.
Right.
To shift that, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, and having that space for clarity, right?
And like really giving yourself that opportunity to have an influx of new information.
Right. Like give myself permission.
It's cool you guys are going into that trip without any expectations or really plans either.
Yeah, which feels scary to me. Like I'm scared because I'm a person that holds too tightly. Like I'm like, wait, we have no plans. What are we gonna fucking do? But also, why am I so worried about that? Right?
Just go.
That's just my perspective. I just need to, go with the flow and be in it, and I know I will once I get there. Right?
Yes.
So yes.
Yep. So for me, my awareness has kind of been centered around the way vibrational energy works and just how strongly it affects ourselves and others, right? We've talked about this before, but like your vibrational energy, it ripples out. And I've just been feeling people's maybe more negative or low frequency vibrations that are around me, and they have been affecting me, and I do want to like create like a protective bubble around myself so that I can not be so affected by other people's energy. But it is very real. I think that in society we kind of always relate to it as vibes, like, oh, their vibe was weird, the vibe in the room was weird, and I think that's of course just like a shortened way of saying vibrational energy, but I think in the spiritual community we're always talking about like actual vibrational energy, and to me that kind of resonates deeper because I think of like the actual vibration, like that emotion like setting out. And so that's just kind of been my awareness. I want to like affect people in a positive way, and I also want to like create that space for myself so that I'm not so affected by what's going on with somebody else, right?
Well, I want to touch on the point that you said where it is real, because something that we learned in school, the very first year of school, is about our aura and our energy field. And everyone has an energy field that expands as long as your arm length. Like, this is my energy field. Cool. So when you're in someone else's energy field, it is affecting you, conscious or unconsciously.
Yes.
Like, it's affecting you. So the fact that you're aware of it and you're like, other people's stuff is affecting me, gives you the power so you can take your power back and put that bubble around yourself and be like, oh, I'm starting to feel this. Well, I'm not going to let this in right now. Like, I'm in my zone and that's enough, right?
Well, it's interesting that you say that about like the arm's length because I'm noticing it's the people in the closest actual physical proximity to me. Not like just relationally, but it's like the people that I live with, the people that I stand by in work, the people that are within like 2 feet of me. I'm feeling it so much.
Yep.
And it's just an interesting thing to perceive, right?
Oh, yes.
So in other news, I hung out with my mom this week, and it was really fun. We just kind of shopped around and caught up as we looked at items, whatever. But we are both watching The Bachelor. You are too.
Yes.
Such a great season so far. If you're not watching, you should catch up. It's so entertaining.
The best one.
It really is the best one.
I feel like that.
Like, the filming is so cool. The girls are all awesome. I think there's like depth. I don't know.
They're not doing stupid dates like they've done in the past that are just like, what are they doing? Like, they're actually like going around the world and like exploring things, and it's great. So go watch it, okay? Even if you're skeptical, try it out.
But so we were discussing like the different girls on the show, and it was just so interesting to hear my mom's perspective of these girls and like my own perspective of these girls. We're watching the same show,
right?
And like the way we perceive these different people on it could not be more drastically different. Like, my mom's like, oh, she's so granola. And I'm like, what? I think she's like a beauty queen. Like, that is not at all how I would view her,
Right.
Or like, oh, I thought she was a bit dramatic about that. And I'm like over here feeling sensitive to that girl's, history or like hardships, so it's just interesting. Which kind of leads us into our topic today of perspective.
Right.
And I'm excited to talk about it because once you become aware of your perspectives and like how they're affected and what they're affected by, or how maybe you're being small-minded or something like that, like you become so aware of it. We decided on this topic, and ever since, this has not even been very long, but I have become so aware of
Yeah.
all of my perspectives and these little like habitual thoughts that I have.
Yeah.
And so I think it's good to challenge it, and I'm excited to
Yes.
talk about it today.
Yeah, I think this is a huge topic. I'm excited too. So we just want to start off.
Yeah, like what is perspective?
Yeah. So we were looking this up on Google, just like what is perspective, just to get like a one-liner, and what it says is a particular attitude towards something or our point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what it is. But also, what we were talking about earlier is our thoughts. Like, our thoughts about something is our perspective,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, when any situation comes up in life and you have this, like, knee-jerk reaction to it, that is
Yeah.
your perspective,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it is so important to challenge that perspective, because there's so much more out there than, like,
Mm-hmm.
our one point of view. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much out there. And if we can, like, expand our minds and, you know, challenge those thoughts that pop up that are just like, you know, it's an example I'm thinking of is just, I've shared this before, but like going into a party where there's all of these people that, you know, you're like feeling really uncomfortable because you don't know all of these people, and then you show up and it's like, oh, this person's triggering me. Oh, I don't want to be around them because like I'm feeling a certain way. That's my perspective around that person.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can challenge that, guess what? That person might be my best friend.
Right.
Right? Like that might
Yes.
be popping up because you're supposed to push through the resistance to be
Yes.
there. But if you never challenge the thought, you're holding yourself back
Right.
from a whole world of experiences and,
Totally.
you know,
I actually,
really living.
yeah, I just had that experience. So
Okay.
it was my girlfriend's birthday
Mhm.
party, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go. I was excited to go. And I pull up and I see all these girls walking into the house with bare legs, and it's winter here.
Yeah.
It's cold. And I'm like, oh shit, I think I didn't get the memo. And I'm wearing a beanie and like my big oversized hoodie, you know, I'm thinking house party vibes. And
Yeah.
so I show up and everyone is dressed to the nines. Turns
Okay.
out the party theme is black tie.
Oh no, and you had no idea.
Yeah. She forgot to mention that part to me. So whatever. That's totally fine. But I almost didn't go in because I was like so nervous. And I would have missed out on a beautiful time, and I actually made friends there.
See, so your initial perspective was like, I don't want to go in. Like,
Yes.
I'm not even with, you know, I'm not even in the same outfit as everyone. Like, I'm totally going to stand out.
Right.
And then what happened?
Well, I was like able to just be myself. And
Yeah.
honestly, in my comfort clothes,
Mm.
even though I was uncomfortable at first, like I felt myself and I could, you know, relate to people. No one really cared that I wasn't dressed like
Yeah.
them, right? Girls were taking off their high heels. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, like it was fine. But
Their
I-
perspective was probably they wish they were dressed like you.
well, it was kind of cute. My friend's
Mhm.
new boyfriend that I met that night, he was like, honestly, your outfit's my favorite. And then he was like, second to yours, to his girlfriend, which was
I
cute.
love
But
that.
yeah.
I love that so much.
But yeah,
Yeah.
we're totally affected by like where we're at and just
Mm-hmm.
how we are showing up in the world. And
Yeah.
that's what perspective does. It shapes like the way we perceive our world,
Mm-hmm.
inner and outer.
Yes. Yes. So that kind of brings us into the question of what influences our perspective.
Oh my goodness.
So is
many
there something,
things.
yeah, that pops up for you?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things that affect us on a daily basis and, you know, over a lifetime, right?
Mhm.
But my first thoughts are kind of like our biases.
Mm-hmm.
So we have like formed these through our family and our upbringing, through our religions, through our culture. And then we form these assumptions about situations or people or what to expect or anticipate. It's us trying to keep ourselves safe. But
Right. And sometimes it's not even conscious. Like,
Yes.
I want to say that. Like, sometimes it's not even conscious that you have these beliefs and feelings and perspective about a certain situation or even ourselves. Like, sometimes you're not even aware of it. It's just something that is innate to us and something that we just is so ingrained in us because of our history and because of our personal experience.
right.
That's very real.
And I think when you look at it, you recognize that a lot of those are your unconscious self.
Yep.
So when you become aware of those things, that's when you start challenging them.
Yep.
But they totally affect you. Like, they're just different. I noticed driving here.
Okay.
And I don't typically think I have like road rage or anything, but I just like, I was getting on the freeway, someone else was entering as well, and it's like, I'm just kind of assuming that they're just gonna try to pass me, and it's like, that's not serving me to assume about someone else that they haven't even made that advance with their car, you know, but I'm just assuming that they're just going to do that because they think they need to get where they're going faster than me or whatever. So,
and then if they really do,
right.
What happens?
Oh, well.
Yeah, oh, well, exactly. Like, what happens? Either you have the opportunity to be triggered and be pissed off and be screaming at the driver that just passed you, or your perspective can shift and be like, whatever.
Yeah.
They're just trying to get where they're going, and also, who knows what their perspective is?
Right.
Maybe they are rushing. Maybe they're late for work. Like, actually, we never know, but I love that you touched on biases because I think that's so important. Like, we can think that we know something about, you know, how somebody is feeling or thinking, but actually we don't know.
True.
That's all based on our own personal experience, right? Is why we have that bias.
Yes.
So I think that's really important to talk about, you know? Yep. And our like assumptions too, like our assumptions of, what people are thinking or feeling, or for example, this is a good example when I started my new job, right? I have never worked in an office full of women before. And all these girls that are like younger than me and just like so in touch with their femininity. And I feel like I'm not, right? That's my perception, right? Which could be true or not. You can hold both. But like going into an office full of girls that like that vibe is around, my initial perception is like, oh, I don't fit in. Like, I don't fit in at all, like, because of my personal experiences. I've never been able to, like, really get along with girls in high school and stuff. Like, I was more of a tomboy. I wasn't, like, super girly like that. So that was my personal, you know, like, how I perceived the situation was like, oh, how is this gonna go? Like, I don't even know. Like, I was feeling all uncomfortable. But I feel like since I've been working there, I'm trying to shift that and be like, you know what? I'm just gonna like let it be what it is. And I'm actually starting to create connections with some of these girls that guess what? They're not all just girly and like I can't connect with them. Actually, I was talking to one of them about how much I love Zelda and she was like, hell yeah. And I'm like, dope, okay. But if I held so tightly onto that perception of them, I would have never made that little connection, right?
It would have
like,
closed that off.
Right. Like, oh, actually, we do have something in common, you know?
Well, and I think you're touching on another point of this is the personal experience that affects your perspective. So you're saying like, oh, in the past, I wasn't able to relate to girls, and you're bringing that experience to this new experience. And right, it's kind of impossible to not bring some transference to each life experience, but when you recognize it and challenge it a little bit, then you have the opportunity to have a new experience.
Yeah, it's like you're recognizing it within yourself. Like, oh, dang, this is something I've been holding for a long time. Oh, wait, I don't have to, because it really is a choice.
And that's healing.
Yeah.
That is like giving yourself the opportunity to experience something new.
Yeah.
And you might be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, most times you will be, you know, it could be sometimes good or bad, right? Like you might be surprised in a different way that's not so positive, but also you're growing by letting yourself drop those thoughts and initial feelings and assumptions and all those things about something. And I feel like it really helps to drop you more into your body and actually what is.
Yes.
Like, I think it's so normal for all of us, not all of us, right? But me and you specifically have this problem where we live a lot in our heads. We can overthink something for so long, and then we stir ourselves into this whole thing that never even had to be to begin with, right? So I feel like it's so important to like be aware of the fact that, oh, this perception's coming up about this person or this experience, and oh wait, I don't have to like hold so tightly onto that.
Yeah.
That initial assumption or what I've known. I can just like drop it and like, oh, let's be in this space for a minute. And I feel like when you allow that space, the clarity does come in. And you do have a new experience, right?
Yes.
Whatever that may be. And that's growth.
Yes.
You know?
Well, and I think it's like, I think that when we do that, you alleviate anxiety. Like,
Right.
you have the opportunity to have so much less anxiety in your life because you're not creating these stories about what something is.
Yes. The stories are a big one. I think that causes so much suffering for so many people is these stories that we put in our head. Again, assumptions, our perspective, right? Assumptions of a certain thing. You create this story that causes so much unnecessary suffering that if you didn't go down that whole rabbit hole, your whole experience would be different, right? So I think it really is just like being aware of when you have these initial knee-jerk reactions to something.
Yeah.
Like creating the awareness around that can shift everything.
Right.
And it's so simple.
Yes.
You know?
And we keep saying, like, challenge these thoughts, but when I'm saying challenge, I mean more like observe them.
Yes.
It's just starting by observing the way that you are, observing the way you come to a situation, right? Because that will shift it. You don't have to, like, try so hard to be different than you are. You will shift those things just in the observation of them and the recognition.
Yes, and also these thoughts and feelings and initial assumptions we have about people actually are us. Like, that's something a lot of people don't recognize, and like something we all need to be aware of and like just be open to is the fact that that actually is like not who we are. That's learned behaviors and habits that we have learned from our parents, right? Our parents have raised us a certain way, and so we've taken in as little tiny children, this is how we navigate the world, when in reality, that's probably not us at all. Like, I feel like becoming aware of these little things really does help us tap more into who we are. And like, oh wait, I'm getting full leg chills, but like, I don't resonate with that anymore. Like, okay, what do I resonate with? You know, like, this actually is not mine. This is a learned behavior, something I've learned from parents, culture, you know, anything, religion. And oh wait, I actually don't resonate with this anymore. Like, what do I actually want? You know?
Yeah.
I think that really is such a huge shift and in such a simple way. You know?
Yep.
It really is so simple.
So there's different types of perspectives.
Yep.
So the first we're kind of talking about right now is like situational perspective. And that can vary day to day. Like, if you wake up and everything goes wrong, like, you're kind of going to see things through that lens. There's always the opportunity to change that, but sometimes it's really hard, right? Yesterday was kind of having a tough day. Like, I wasn't really doing much, but I wanted to accomplish things, and I don't know, I struggled till like 3 p.m. and I finally left my house and I did one chore and my whole day shifted. And I was just suddenly so like, and I was like, geez, it's crazy how fast things can change. And then I was talking to you on the phone and I walked into the store and they had a whiteboard, and I'll share this on our Instagram.
This was right after we were like, is this the topic we should do? We, you know, living in the question with, is this the topic?
Right. And so I walked in and it was like, there was this little whiteboard with kind of cute little art that said, sometimes you need to look at life from a different perspective. And perspectives in all different colors, and it just looked so cute. And I was like, dude, it's our sign.
Yeah. This is our topic.
Yeah. So
I love that.
But yeah, your situation totally affects how you perceive things. Another example of that would be like, if you're in a toxic relationship and your girlfriend's telling you about something her boyfriend or girlfriend did, right? You're kind of going to come at it from a negative lens, right? You're going to be like, oh, they're definitely cheating on you or whatever, because that's your own experience. A lot of times you perceive things through your own, personal experience. So I think it's good to get different perspectives from people. You know, when you're looking for advice, maybe ask someone who's different than you. Because maybe you'll gain something that you wouldn't have if you went to your same friend who's always going to validate your opinion. Or whatever.
Because you're so closely aligned. So that kind of brings up just like being more open-minded. To hearing different perspectives. Because a lot of the time we're not, right? So like, we have this perspective on something that keeps us safe, right? It's what we know. Like, to challenge that and like open up to something different sometimes is scary. But even if you don't resonate with somebody saying, at least be open to hearing what their perspective is. I feel like that changes so much, right? Like, in yourself and in them, that you're even just like willing to hear it and maybe then share your perspective. Like, that's growth, right? So something I wanted to talk about with this is we were talking about wherever you are emotionally and physically is going to be the lens that you see the world through that day. But that can shift. And also, I wanted to say too, like, as humans, we view the world first through our own internal feelings and experiences. Like, that's just natural for us, right? But let's challenge that a little bit. And, it's like we view the world through our own internal perception first, and then that's how we take in the external world. So let's challenge that, and those initial feelings that you get, right? Let's start to think about those things and be more aware of them, and so that then you can view the world with more open eyes, and like a more open heart. Yes. Don't hold so tightly. This holding so tightly thing is coming up a lot today, but it's true.
It is true.
That's growth. Like, if you're going to keep yourself stuck if you do that.
Right.
There's only one way to be, and this is the way. Like, how do you ever grow with that mindset?
Well, and you think about the world that we live in right now. We're more globalized than we ever have been. So we can connect with people across the world. We are learning about different cultures online through social media. Our societies, the cultures that we actually physically live in, are more blended than they have ever been. And embracing that is going to open your eyes. Yes. You're going to have so many new cool experiences if you allow it. If you're hardened and you're bitter about it, which, for example, in my hometown, so many people are moving from out of state, and my parents and my family and all the people that live there really are like afraid and like, it's changing. And I even find myself feeling that way, right? But that change is inevitable. Maybe embrace it. How much better is your life going to be if you view it from that point of view than fear and resentment? And holding so tightly on to this is what it is and this is what I know. And what it's been. Yes, and what it's been. Right. But also, life has changed. Change happens all the time, all around us. Even if we don't feel like we're changing specifically, it's happening all around us, which kind of brings us into the other form of perspective, which is cultural perspective. Yes. So I feel like the big one that comes up for me when I think about cultural perspective is religion. Yeah. Growing up in the Mormon church and LDS religion, I had this view of the world that was totally different than how I view it now. And it's just so interesting to think about. An example Maddie brought up is even just like with marijuana, right? Like, growing up, that was so shunned upon, and like, no, you never do that. Like, such a bad thing. And I remember feeling that way about it. Like, I was scared to be around it, or I would see somebody smoking. And I remember one specific experience when I was younger, and I was in the car. I was probably like maybe 8. But I remember this is I saw somebody smoking a cigarette, and I looked at my mom and I was like, Mom, like, what is that? Like, why is that person smoking? Like, that's not good for them. And she just was like, said her thing of just, well, that's something that you never want to do. And, kind of like her whole spiel on it. Yeah. But I had this moment of like, oh, I just like feel so bad for that person that like they're in that with my little like tender soul. Right. But now it's like, the very first time I ever smoked weed, okay, this is a good example too. The very first time I ever smoked weed, I was still going to church, in the church, and I knew how frowned upon like drugs were and things like that. I don't even like calling marijuana a drug. I feel like it's a medicine. Cannabis. Yeah, cannabis. So I remember feeling so like scared because of what I knew, because of my perspective. Like, I grew up, and this is a bad thing, and I should never do this. I had all these thoughts, right? An initial perspective about it. But then when I actually did it, because I was so curious, and I was open to try it because I was so curious, and I went into it with this mindset of, I'm going to just see how I feel. Yeah. Aside from what all, the guilt and the this is bad and all that stuff, like, I'm actually just going to go into this being open-minded and see how I feel about it. And so I did. And actually, when I tried it for the first time, I tapped in that way, and I was like, oh, how do I feel about it? And I didn't feel bad. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel like I'm going to hell because I smoked a bowl. Like, I didn't feel any of that. And it totally shifted my whole perspective of like, oh, wait, there's a whole world out here for me to explore. But if I stay stuck in this religious perspective
and cultural thing that I was in, then how am I ever going to like experience the world?
Right.
You know? And that was a huge shift for me in so many ways.
Well, and how are you going to discover like what's true to you?
Exactly.
Like, I do feel kind of sad for people who never challenge those thoughts or like their upbringing, whether that's religiously or anything,
right,
like in any way, because how do you know what truly resonates with you if you don't question it a little bit?
Yeah, right. I think that's so important.
But a lot of religions discourage you from questioning anything. That's
just scary.
Yes.
That scares me. That really scares me because that is very real.
Right.
It's just like a controlling thing, right? And like just follow the norm. I mean, even if you think about like social media, this is a big one. That's kind of a cultural perspective. There's the perspective of these women on there that are just so perfect and Botox, right? Like no wrinkles, like just these perfect women. And if you're not that, like you get down on yourself. And these young girls that are now so involved in social media in junior high, high school, like have these views, right? Of what it should be. And if they're not that, like that's creating so much suffering.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I don't know.
Well, and that's affecting everyone. I mean, I'm affected by that. I get on social media and I always feel down after I get off of it. I'm like, dang, I like am nothing, you know? And I know better. But I still have those feelings. And even when I was hanging out with my mom, you know, I had told her about this model and I'm like, she has just such amazing hair. And my mom followed her and she's like, my mom kind of voiced these things like, oh yeah, she's just so beautiful and so skinny and just has the coolest style. And I could hear in my mom's tone, it kind of like, it was a little bit of a comparison thing, like, oh, must be nice. And it's like, this shit is toxic, you know? That's not the purpose of being here, to just be beautiful on the external. So
right. And as you're hearing her say that, you probably are like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like it was probably such a big perspective moment for you of like, whoa. Like this is my mom and this is how she feels. And also that's probably something that you grew up with is like feelings like that, right? Like kind of her perspective. But being able to even say what you just said right now is you shifting your own perspective.
Yes.
You know, like, oh wait, it doesn't have to be like that. That's so beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, it really is. So I just think being more open-minded to, oh wait, what is it that I truly resonate with? Or like who am I outside of everyone else's perspective of me or my religion's perspective of what I should be? Like, wait, let's stop and be a little more open-minded about like, who am I? Right? I think that's a really important thing to ponder.
Yes.
You know?
It is.
Yeah, and like challenge yourself. So
there are another way of looking at perspective is material versus spiritual. And I'm actually going to let you read this.
Should we do this first?
We can get back to that.
Okay. So this is something I found super interesting this morning. I was reading is two different types of perspective, material perspective versus spiritual perspective. So I'll read material first and then we can kind of talk about it and then we'll go into the spiritual. So this article by, oh my goodness, what was his name? Jogindra Kohli was his name. And he says material perspective, this is what it is. A material perspective tends to prioritize the physical aspects of existence and focuses on the tangible and measurable aspects of reality. It is rooted in the belief that the material world is the primary or sole reality, and that all phenomena can be explained through physical laws and empirical observations. The material perspective often emphasizes the pursuit of material wealth, sensory gratification, and the accumulation of possessions as the primary sources of happiness and fulfillment, which I just found that so interesting because I think so many people are stuck in that, this material perspective, right? And I feel like religion is a great way for people to tap more into their spiritual perspective and like see things through a different light, but also being so like if you don't have religion, right, you don't have this piece of spirituality in your life and like, oh, there's something bigger, you get stuck in this material perspective. And I feel like thinking that this is all there is, like this physical existence, like what's around me, what I can touch is all that's here is so limited. And like, it's sad to think about that, right? Like people who might be kind of stuck in that, but there is a way to shift it, you know, and that is through the spiritual perspective. So, do you have anything to say about material?
Well, I was just thinking it is beyond like material, tangible, physical touch things as
Right.
well. It's like outcomes or wanting to be perceived in a
Right.
certain light, right? It's
Right.
kind of those, oh, I want to be successful. I want to be viewed as successful. Or, you know what I mean? Those things I think fit within the material perspective.
Yes, and I love where it says sensory gratification too, because that's a huge part of it, is like seeking this gratification from the material world. Like giving ourselves Botox to get rid of our wrinkles 24/7. Like, are you ever going to be happy with when you start to get a little wrinkle back? Like, no, you're not.
Right.
You're always chasing the next best thing. Like, that keeps you so stuck in this just like cycle, right? So, I feel like this kind of brings us into the spiritual perspective. This is what the article says. A spiritual perspective, on the other hand, recognizes that there is more to reality than the physical realm alone. It acknowledges the existence of a non-physical or transcendent aspect of existence that may include concepts such as consciousness, soul, higher realms, or divine principles. A spiritual perspective seeks to explore the deeper meaning, purpose, and interconnectedness of life. I'm not done yet, but even when I just read that, I just feel my whole body just like melt. Like,
me too.
Oh, because it is that, right? There's so much. Like, the universe is real. Like, when you think about how many stars are out there and like how many worlds upon worlds upon worlds, like, how can just what we see be all that there is, you know? And if you think that way and you believe that way, then that's okay. Just maybe challenge that a little bit. Like, oh, is there something else? Right?
Well, and there's so much to this earth that we live on.
Right.
You know, so even if your perspective's here,
yeah,
like there's so much to this world and this existence.
Right.
We can talk about that more though.
Yes, than what you just see with your eyes, right? There's so much more. Even energy.
Yes.
Like, you can't see energy, but we can perceive it. We can feel it. So the rest of this just says, it often emphasizes inner growth, self-awareness, and the pursuit of higher truths or spiritual experiences. This perspective may involve practices such as meditation, prayer, mindfulness, and the cultivation of virtues like compassion and gratitude. So when you pair these two things together, like material and spiritual, if you think about just being in one or the other, like, how are you really experiencing life? Like, if you think about that, like, again, it's this holding too tightly thing. Even if you're too stuck in the spiritual perspective and you're not like in your body in the world, like that can be not healthy either, right? So I think kind of marrying these two things and just like being with what is, and also knowing that there's so much more than we can even imagine.
Yeah.
Like, those two things just, I feel like they just need to be together, you know? We need to have both.
Yep.
So when I was just thinking about spiritual perspective, I just feel like it's just the lens that gives you clarity about how you relate to different energy patterns and like how you relate to more than just this physical existence, right? So yeah, I think this is super interesting to think about.
It is. So I think with that, we can talk about like ways to expand your perspective. And why that's beneficial.
Yeah. So before we go into that though,
Sure.
I do want to talk about one more thing of perspective, is like this relational perspective.
True.
Because I think that's so important, and specifically in relationships. It doesn't even have to be, do you have that little art thing?
Oh, yes.
It doesn't even have to be like in like a loving relationship, like somebody that you're, you know, dating or whatever. It doesn't have to be that way, but I just think relationships in general, I feel like having an unhealthy relationship is going to skew your perspective of actually what you want and deserve because you're in it. Totally. And when you're in it, you can't see a different perspective because that is your perspective. You're in it and you're cycling through it, and there's no way, it feels like there's no way to get out of it and see another light. So I read something today that resonated with this specific thing, and it just says, This is much like being in a human relationship with a mismatched partner. While your energy is tied up with that person, it's hard to see the potential for a more aligned, loving, and joyful relationship to come into your life. Your current relationship can easily block better relationships from coming through. Breaking up with that person is also a way of transforming that relationship. Enforcing boundaries can help you get some distance from a misaligned relationship so you can reassess what kind of relationship you want to have in this area. And I think this resonates a lot with me and Maddie because we've both been in some relationships that have been like this, right? Where you're just so stuck in it and you can't see another way. And like, I think about specifically for me, speaking for myself, like I was in an unhealthy marriage, right, for a long time. And there was this part of me when I was in it where I was just like, do I like get out because I know that's what I need, or do I just stay because like that's the easier thing? And it was so hard for me to get out. Like I tried and I had this hope for so long, but also when you're the only one working on yourself, the other person's stagnant, like you're gonna stay stagnant too.
Yes.
Until you get the space to be in your own space, right? So I feel like it's not until you get out of that where you have the space that the clarity and your perspective starts to shift. It can't shift when you're in it. You know?
Yeah, you do have to give it space for sure.
Yeah.
And that's like the most important decision you're going to make in your life is like who you're going to be in a relationship with, who you're going to have as a partner.
Yeah.
And I've been in the same space as you where I was in a relationship for 5 years, just like challenging it and fighting and just trying to motivate this person. Like, come on, give me more, be more for yourself. Like, we both tend to see people's potential and believe in it and hope for it, but you can't like date someone based on their potential. And so
I can never change that for them.
Exactly.
Right.
And so I think what you touched on is perfect because in my relationship that I'm talking about, I started to see things so skewed. Like I really did. I thought I had no self-worth.
Yeah.
I thought that I didn't deserve someone better than him. You know, I thought that that was it for me. Even though I knew it wasn't good enough and I knew that it wasn't right, I was just like, well, maybe there will never be someone after this.
Yeah,
it's
because
that fear-based thought.
Right.
You know, thought patterns. So I do think give yourself space.
That's the biggest thing.
Yeah. We talk about it all the time.
Yes.
But so important.
Right. And even in like friendships too. This is a big one, you know, in this relational perspective. Like when you've been friends with somebody for so long, like you start to have the same thoughts about things, or you start to like feel similarly about things. So it kind of comes back to what we were talking about is like being open-minded to hear other things.
Yes.
Like to shift your perspective, because we can get so stuck in this one perspective that it really does skew our whole view of the world when you're holding too tightly again, right?
Well, and we're always going to be looking for validation, right? We go to the people or situations that validate us so that we can feel comfortable. But we have to learn to sit in discomfort a bit so that we can grow. Because if you're always going to be comfortable, if you're always going to be validated by your mom or by whoever, your best friend, like you might be missing out on new perspectives that would actually make you happier in the future. Might not be comfortable now. Right? You know, it's like commonly in our upbringing, like it's frowned upon to get divorced and it's frowned upon to like form a new family or do things like that. But imagine some people who would have stayed imagine if you had stayed.
Oh my gosh. My whole life would be different.
Sad life.
I would. And I would probably be really low and just not have as much of this spiritual self that I have now. But the only way that I grew that was by getting out. And I feel like once you like get out of something like that, like an unhealthy relationship, or kind of like create boundaries and kind of slowly step away from a friendship that's draining your energy. This is something we touched on a different episode, was like how people drain your energy. And like, are the people around you draining your energy? Then maybe you need a different perspective to get out of that for a second, set the boundary. And I feel like it really allows the space for you to like stand in your own power of like, oh, this is me. And like, oh wait, I have the space now to think of like, what is my own perspective?
Mm-hmm.
You know, aside from whatever you were in, right?
Mhm.
That's very real. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's good. I
So-
love that.
So should we chat about ways to expand
Yes.
our perspective?
Yep.
So there's a lot of ways, which
Okay.
is cool. I
Mhm.
think it's exciting.
Yeah.
The first one that comes to mind is travel, which you're going to do.
Yeah.
But just because I've had this experience recently quite a few times this year already, like it was just so transformative to me and for me to travel. Like I just gained new perspectives. I had that space without a lot of it was because I didn't have cell phone service for a lot of my road trip.
Right.
But it's like it gave me that space to just let my mind wander and to think about things from a new perspective. And I think there's so much value in that. And so yeah, let yourself go experience something new. Do something completely different than you normally would.
And be open-minded to whatever the experience brings you. Because I don't think you would have had that perspective shift if you weren't.
Or if I had expectations of what everything should be.
Right. Right.
And I think that's actually a good point. Like when you're traveling, leave some time to just have an experience that you didn't plan.
Be open to whatever's going to come will come, you know, because it always will, you know, one way or another. It's real. Yeah. I'm trying to think of different ways to expand our perspective, but the biggest thing that just keeps coming to mind, we already touched on, is just like the space. Like, you have to have the space to expand your perspective. If you don't have the space, you can't, right? Like, or you could, but it might not stick. Like, you need to be open-minded and have the space to, open up a little bit in order for your perspective to shift, right? I feel like that's the biggest thing that comes to mind for me. But also, maybe have a little bit more empathy.
Yes.
You know, maybe have a little bit more empathy for people or the scenario or situation that they are in, because your initial perspective might just be like let's just say there's a friend that's going through a situation that you're just like, oh my God, you need to get out of that. Like, what are you doing? Like, that's your initial feelings. Maybe they're in a shitty relationship and you're hearing them vent about it all the time. And you're just like, what are you doing? Like, get out. Like, that's your initial perspective. But I just feel like if maybe you can stop for a second and like recognize, oh, this is my initial perspective. Let's have a little bit more empathy for this person. Maybe your perspective will shift of, oh, dang, like I'm seeing this in a broader view of, oh my gosh, this is actually like where they are. And like, there's some things that they're struggling with that maybe you couldn't see because initially you're just like, oh my gosh, get out. You know what I mean? Like, what are you doing? Like, I just feel like empathy is a big way to create that space for being more open-minded. Yeah.
Right. Well, and it helps you understand that you don't know everything about a situation or a person or their background.
And you never do.
You don't.
We all have our own transference, our own personal life experiences that have made us who we are, and you can never fully put yourself in somebody else's shoes. You can't. Like, their perspective, the way they view the world is totally different.
Well, and imagine like yourself being judged by someone, the way that you're perceiving them, right? Like you're probably feeling like, oh my gosh, they don't understand me. They don't know what I'm going through. They don't know the other side of this relationship or whatever it is. But it's like, you're going to feel better when you approach life with more empathy. You will, because it will make you less hardened. You won't be so bitter. And I think there's so much to learn from other people's perspectives. Like, I'm so grateful that I've had the opportunity to learn from other people and that I didn't shut that off, you know, at an early age, because I've learned so much, and it's really made my life more enriched and better. Being open to learning about new people, hearing about new points of view, or like, there's just so much to like study or understand here on this earth. Like, I love it. I think it's so cool. I think we can look back in history. Like, I've always been intrigued by like Native American culture and like the way they view spirituality. Even within the spiritual realm, there's so many ways to approach it, and staying open to that has really like given me a lot of cool ideas and perspectives. And sometimes things don't resonate. You know, I have a girlfriend who's like into some wild things, and they don't resonate, but who am I to say that they're not right?
Right.
And
it's
maybe
right for her right now.
Exactly.
That's her perspective right now, and
Mhm.
that's what she needs, and that's beautiful for her, right?
Yeah.
And I think too, not even just like in external relationships, but within ourselves, like holding empathy for ourselves too. Like,
Yeah.
that's a huge part, because when you can start to like be a little more open-minded, or start to notice those initial knee-jerk reactions or thoughts or feelings that come up in any situation, you have a little bit more space to be like, oh wait, why am I feeling this way? Or start to kind of like ponder it and have empathy for the part of you that is trying to keep yourself safe. Like, you're trying to keep yourself safe by these initial reactions. That's how you've always done it. That's how you've kept yourself safe. But I feel like when you can hold the empathy of like, oh, that's just that part of me that maybe I don't resonate with anymore, it allows for a huge shift to happen, right? But if you don't have compassion for that part of you, and you're like, why the fuck am I thinking about that? Or you're getting so hard on yourself, or you're just like beating yourself down, like, you're not going to have a shift, right? So it's like, oh, let's have a little bit of empathy and compassion for these parts of ourselves that maybe we don't like so much, because they have been there to keep us safe. And thank you. Thank you, but it no longer serves me, right? That's kind of the way you have to hold it. So I think that's a big thing to say too, is just not only empathy and compassion for everyone else, but first for ourselves, right?
Totally. Well, I think that those characteristics that we all want, we want to be compassionate people, I think. I think that we all want to care for others, care for ourselves. I think that starts sometimes with an outside lens, right? Like, my thought right now is volunteering. Then you're interacting with people from a socioeconomic background that's different than yours, and you're going to have more compassion and empathy, and then it's going to in turn make you more grateful for the things that you have in the life that you've experienced, you know? I think there's really beautiful ways to like shift your perspective, and I think we need to like cultivate time for those things, especially like volunteering. I've always felt this draw to it, but I've never fully committed to it. I do little things here and there, but just this conversation is making me realize like that's something that I need to do. Yeah. And want to do.
Right. Oh, I love this so much.
Serving others.
Yeah. Serving others.
You can learn so much about people when you come to a conversation with an open mind.
Yeah. And maybe you don't resonate with what they're saying, but again, being open-minded is like, oh, dang, that's cool. That's their perspective and their experience. And you're learning something through that, right? Oh, I love that so much. So yeah, this is a huge topic. And I just feel like I want to just bring it back really quick to what we said at the beginning, is the fact that this might feel huge when you guys are hearing this, to think about shifting your whole perspective. Like, yeah, that's huge, right? But it really is such a small shift of just noticing, like you said at the beginning, observe when you have these initial thoughts or feelings or things that pop up that you're, observe them and be like, oh, that's interesting. Right? And
That's
then you
all
have, that's all it takes. Then you have this whole space to be like, oh, wait, what do I actually believe in? Right? So this brings us into our challenge. Our challenge, so from like the spiritual perspective that we're talking about, I just want you guys to think about these questions. And you don't even have to have answers right now, but just ponder them and think about them. So there's just 2 questions. The first one is, what is my current relationship with this part of life? So when you're noticing these thoughts, right? These feelings and thoughts that just like pop up, and you're like observing them and being aware, maybe think about this question. What is my current relationship with this piece of what's coming up? How does it make you feel? You know, do you hate that you do that? Do you, whatever it is, just like be aware of it. And that automatically gives you a shift. And then the other question is, how would I like my relationship with this part of life to be? So those 2 questions pair perfectly together of, oh, what is my current relationship with this piece? And also, how would I like this relationship with this part of life to be?
Yes.
You know?
You're able to create the life you want to live, and through the lens that you want it to be.
Right.
And those questions are really great. I think they're ways to start viewing it that way.
Yeah, and to like really expand. So maybe just hold those questions in your mind. Like, oh, I'm not liking this part of myself. So how would I like it to be?
Yeah.
And it gives you this whole other perspective shift.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that.
Well said.
Yes. Also, I just want to mention to everyone that's listening that I can now start doing healings.
Yay.
So anybody that is interested, I'm so excited to start doing this. I just feel like healings and doing this type of healing non-duality work has changed my entire life. Like I would not be who I am, have this podcast right now if it wasn't for this kind of work. So I just want to put it out there that I'm doing that, and anybody who is feeling interested as I bring this up, just reach out to me. And so, yeah, on Instagram. So my personal Instagram is just at Sadie Brooksby. And so, yeah, or on our podcast Instagram, send us a message, whatever. Also, we want to start interacting with you guys more. Like, we love it. We love when you guys interact with us, or even let us know, oh my gosh, what was your perspective shift this week?
Yes.
So, yes. Sorry if you can hear my kids screaming in the background. I guess that means it's time. It's time to close out. But yeah, reach out to me if you guys have, any interest in healings, or even like, oh my gosh, what is a healing? Like, what is that? What do you do? What is it about? Like, reach out to me and we can talk a little more about it. And also, I do Reiki. So if that's something you're interested in as well, reach out to me. And reach out to me and Maddie because we want to hear from you. So thank you guys so much for listening, and yeah, we'll talk to you next week. Bye!
Take me higher.